was it like growing up as the son of Harry Langdon?
What was it like growing up with the son of Harry Langdon? Well, look, I'll tell you real quick. A real interesting psychological thing. My father never came home with makeup on. He always took it off before he came home. So when he came home, he looked like a normal, everyday guy, you know. And so I think that my parents wanted me to see him as a father and not so much as perhaps a clown in a way, you know. And so, but around the house, there was constant entertainment that he was trying to entertain the children. He used to play the banjo, and he got tired with the banjo. He'd do a tap dance, and then you know, anytime the kids would be around, he would entertain them. And then, of course, you know, dinner time was dinner time. But then he would usually, after he got through entertaining me and the children and being a father, he would go back and do his painting. He was an expert watercolorist and a cartoonist. And he also loved playing the piano, and he would play the piano sometimes till all hours of the night. You know, as a kid, I'd be lying in bed, I could hear him playing the piano, and so it was really a beautiful, beautiful life. You know, honestly, I thought all children live like this. All children have a father, famous, entertainment, and it's all fun and games. And then when he died, it was such a shock. You know, wow, man, this was kind of like a fantasy life I was living. And so then things got much more serious, obviously, after that. YouTube, I see a lot of my father's really neat personal films.
Right.
And so, you know, it's one of those things that are great memories, and I'm glad people could enjoy my father's life and his personal life. It was really unique life that we lived, and when he was alive, he tried his darndest to be a great father. But remember, he was working all the time. Remember, he was doing 3 movies a year, and in between, like stage shows and things like that. And so my dad did not have a lot of time to hang out and be with the kids. You know, like I said, he used to come home at night and he kind of slip in the back door of the house, and he'd get upstairs and he would wash. They wore grease paint in those days. I don't know if you guys know what that is. Grease makeup, Max Factor, you know, grease makeup, and he would go in and try to wash this all off before he'd come out and see me and see anybody else. And that what startled me was I used to go to my parents' bedroom, into their bathroom as a little kid, you know, this high, and I see all this makeup just strewn, you know, all this grease paint makeup. It's impossible to get out of the bowl, you know. And that's what kind of got me thinking, what's going on here, you know. So, but there was one, maybe you guys might, I've told this once before, but he very seldom took me on the lot you know, on the screenings, again, because he was all full makeup, and they really didn't have time for a little kid running around on a stage, you know. So, but one incident was he took me on the stage where he was filming An Elephant Never Forgets, and took me on the stage there. And that was indelibly etched in my memory, because when a little kid, like 6 years old, goes onto a stage and these huge doors are opened up, and in comes Harry Langdon with his kid, you know. So wow, it was really a wonderful experience. I'll always remember, but very seldom did he ever take me on the set, because it was serious stuff. Comedy is serious business, and they're usually trying to create these acts without really planning too much. They didn't script them. We had a home in Canoga Park. You all know where that is. Folks from New York don't know where that is. It was just like a desert community, right? And it was just a bunch of sand and walnut trees. And but my parents would invite over all these famous actors, Red Skelton Stan Laurel and invite just, you know, they'd all be in the backyard. But the favorite thing to do, I think they had this once a month. They would have a big barbecue in the backyard, and with a big barbecue pit, and they would, I don't have time really to explain how complicated it was, but they used to cook taquitos, and they would have, they had this big galvanized barrel, and they fill it with ice, and they'd fill it with Bud Light and Miller's High Life, and all these famous people would sit around after. Well, my father was singing and performing and playing the banjo, by the way. All of these people were theatrical people, and they would participate. They'd be singing all these great songs and everything out in the backyard. I just figured all kids live like this, you know, it's just extreme entertainment. And so, even when we had the home in the Hollywood Hills, they would have over a lot of the famous people play the piano and sing these kind of rowdy songs, I guess, country songs, and it was a lot of fun. And I was really spoiled. And then when my father died, it was just all over, you know. So
I know you were a very little child. I'm talking loud so you can hear me. Did you ever get to meet any of the people that your dad worked with? For instance, he worked with Stan Laurel and Oliver Hardy in several films. Did you ever meet them, or did you ever go to the set?
I talked to Stan Laurel. Had a personal meeting with him because when I was in the preliminary stages of doing a book about my father, everybody said, you've got to go talk to some of his friends that were acquaintances, his stand-ins and all. But a lot of them were very reluctant to reveal very much about my father. And I thought, this is kind of interesting. Vernon Dent, who I'm sure you all know who he is, he played the heavy in my father's, literally a heavy. And he used to take me to the baseball game. And on Sundays, he tried to be a stand-in father for me. And, you know, they figured I was going to come out pretty warped now after my dad died. And so they did all sorts of things to try to get me kind of stabilized and become a real kid, you know. And so I was a pretty spoiled brat, and I have to admit it. But my father did something which was really cool. He was quite a carpenter, and what he would do, he'd go out in the garage. He's always building these cars. He wanted to resurrect the car act. You all know about Johnny's New Car Act. It was his, it was his stage act, okay? And when he was in vaudeville, it was extremely successful, by the way. They say he made millions of dollars with this Johnny's New Car Act. But my father was always tinkering in the garage with carpentry tools, and had a lot of nice tools out there. So what he would do, he would make me small toys out of wood and that I could assemble myself. And so I enjoyed that. That was kind of, my dad did this for me, and now it's something I should carry on. And then gradually, my father was really cool. He got me involved in Boy Scouts. And my father, to kind of encourage me to get in there with the other boys in the Boy Scouts, right? He would have stage plays. What he did, he created a vaudeville act for these Boy Scouts, because with a prop cannon on stage, and it was just insane what my father would do to try to partake in the whole thing, being a father and Boy Scouts, and I learned a great deal in Boy Scouts, and finally, after my dad died, I became a carpenter. I was an apprentice carpenter with the knowledge I learned that my father had taught me. And I did that about 4 years. I became a journeyman carpenter. So it was just some little insights what my father used. My father in his career did 96 films, that are extraordinary films, which in a 30-year period, that's quite a feat. And can you imagine how hard he was working? Or roughly 3 films a year. And I really admire him for doing that. And the point of me mentioning that is that the work that he did was all condensed into this book, the knowledge of how Harry Langdon pursued his career and how it was designed, and the loves and the heartaches and the tragedies that he went through by Gabriella. Gabriella has been working on this book and finally got it published probably, 2 years ago, a year and a half ago, by University Press. And the story alone about how Gabriella got the book published is quite a story, and we may not have time tonight for me to tell you the whole thing, but a few circumstances happened after my father passed away. My mother was left with me and had to earn a living, and went to work for the Motion Picture Relief Fund, by the way. And she did well, you know. It was kind of struggle. We had a nice home in Studio City. And a man named Ray Rohauer came along, who many of you may know. And he's a silent film tycoon, kind of involved in the kind of the underworld of silent films. And Raymond Rohauer came to my mother and said, how about us distributing these silent films, which you now have owned, along with the still picture collection. And so my mother, you know, grasped at the chance perhaps to make some extra money. And so they started showing my father's films around the world. And this was back in 1985, or around that period. I'm a little vague on the dates. So he and Ray Rohauer and my mother were successful in getting my father's films seen out to the public again. Okay, so then they thought, well, these films are pretty successful. How about doing a book? How about publishing a book, Mabel Langdon? And so she agreed and said, we've got to find a writer, really a top-notch biographer who would be appropriate and capable of writing such a deep, involved study like this, since many other writers have written about my father at that time. And so they wanted to do a book to end all books, just the total final compilation of the Harry Langdon story. So they, Raymond Rohauer knew about Gabriella and put her on and retained her as the writer and started her working. Now, forgive me, Gabriella, but some of these dates may be a little vague, you know. So Gabriella was